James Farmer was an active member in the civil rights movement of the 1960s. He had a significant role in the organizing of the Freedom Rides and also as the leader of the Congress of Racial Equality. Farmer believed in nonviolent methods of fighting and built CORE with that belief. CORE would eventually play a major role in the desegregation of the United States and the creation of equal opportunity for all people through his nonviolent means. After the civil rights movement, Farmer would continue doing work that would continue the fight against racism.
James Baldwin was born in Harlem on August 2, 1924. Baldwin attended a very prestigious high school in the Bronx, where he got his start in writing for the school newspaper. After joining his stepfather in the pulpit for 3 years, he left the United States and moved to Paris, France, to escape the prejudice against blacks and homosexuals. Drawn back to the United States by the civil rights movement, Baldwin became a political activist in the 1960s. By 1963, Baldwin had become such an avid spokesperson for the movement, Time magazine had published him on the cover, and he met with Martin Luther King Jr. while on a Freedom Ride headed to Montgomery.
Virginia Durr was a white woman from Alabama. From an early age, Durr had a strong sense of dignity, shaped by her childhood attachment with the Black Nanny. She was a member of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, the Junior League, and the Red Cross. Among her work was pushing for the campaign to abolish the poll tax. Her belief in social justice developed as she was pulled into the middle of a historical moment of impact. On the evening of Rosa Parks' arrest, Virginia Durr went to the Montgomery jail with her husband to settle bail for Parks' release. Virginia continued her involvement with the civil rights movement and the Freedom Rides.
So we were going to recruit whites and blacks to ride through Virginia, the Carolinas, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, going to New Orleans, arriving in New Orleans on the anniversary of the Brown decision of the Supreme Court, May 17th. And as we rode through the South, the white riders would sit in the back of the bus, the blacks would sit in the front of the bus. We refused to move when ordered, and we would accept whatever came nonviolently. Every rest stop, the whites would go into the black waiting room, that labeled for colored, and the blacks would go into the waiting room labeled for whites. We would drink white water, whites would drink colored water. We would use all the facilities and refuse to stop doing that when ordered. Refused to leave and accept arrest or violence, whatever came. You know that in Alabama, everything happened. The Greyhound bus was burned to the ground at Anniston. One Freedom Rider, a 62-year-old man, he was the oldest, 61 or 62, thought he was ancient then. Now, in retrospect, I think he was approaching middle age. Dr. Walter Bergman, a white professor of education in Wayne State University and University of Michigan. He was so brutally beaten on one of those buses that he suffered a stroke, cerebral hemorrhage. He has been paralyzed and in a wheelchair ever since. He's now 94. Still in the wheelchair. I spoke to him 2 or 3 weeks ago by phone. He's still keeping the faith in that wheelchair.
The Freedom Rides were instituted by CORE.
The first Freedom Ride took place on May 4th, 1961, when 7 blacks and 6 whites left Washington, D.C. on 2 public buses headed for the Deep South.
Freedom Rides were intended to test the Supreme Court ruling Boynton v. Virginia, which declared segregation in interstate buses and rail stations unconstitutional.
However, by the second week of the Freedom Rides, riders were severely beaten.
Buses were burned, and in Birmingham, several dozen whites attacked the riders 2 blocks from the sheriff's office.
After the attack, the riders continued to Mississippi, where they endured further brutality and jail time.
By the end of the summer, the protests had spread to train stations and airports across the South, and in November, the Interstate Commerce Commission issued rules prohibiting segregated transportation facilities.